She kissed him on the cheek. Not me, him. Her boss. On stage. In front of 400 people. I sat at table 12, next to a half-finished filet mignon and a napkin I'd folded so tightly it looked like origami. She held the glass award over her head like a damn torch, grinning as the spotlights flared. To my brilliant team, and especially to this man, she said, gesturing toward the silver-haired idiot in the front row. He's not just my boss. He's my partner in every sense that matters. My fork froze midair. The table around me chuckled awkwardly. Then she said it. Loud. Clear. Into the mic. Do you even know who he is? Her manicured hand pointed right at me, sitting alone in my crumpled suit. That sentence sliced cleaner than any knife I've ever held. And I've worked with blades long enough to know. The whole room erupted in laughter. The camera flash caught the exact moment I blinked twice and smiled. Because of course I did. That's what you do when your wife humiliates you during a corporate gala hosted in a ballroom your family quietly co-owns. You smile. The jazz band kicked up again like nothing happened. Waiters refilled wine. Her boss gave a two-handed wave as he stood for a standing ovation she didn't deserve. And while she soaked it in, I sat still. I just calmly unfolded my napkin, placed it next to my plate, and looked to the far wall. That's where he was. Not part of the gala. Not part of any table. Just standing. Watching. Dressed in a charcoal gray suit. No name tag. No drink. No one else seemed to notice him. He gave me a small nod. Then he began walking. And hey, before we keep going, if you're one of the 90% listening without subscribing, I get it. It's easy to stay invisible. I did it for 20 years. But that little button, hitting it tells the team who built this story that it mattered to you. And honestly, that fuels us more than you know. Back to it. He walked right past the security at the entrance, through the clusters of engineers and analysts laughing at the open bar, past the VP of something or other who was too deep into his third scotch to notice. Straight to our table. She was mid-sip of a rose she swore she hated when the man leaned in, real quiet, right behind her boss's chair. You're done, he said. The guy choked on his wine, turned, sputtered something unintelligible. And then, this mystery man turned to me. Just me. No smile. No warmth. Just a steady voice that sliced through the white noise of string instruments and casual networking. They're ready for you. That's it. No one else at the table moved. She blinked. Wait, what? I stood, adjusted my tie, ignored her entirely. She put her hand on my arm, maybe for the first time all night. Where are you going? What does that mean? I didn't answer, didn't even look at her, because the moment he said that, the moment he, the man she didn't recognize, spoke those 4 words, everything I had spent the last 2 years building, quietly, methodically, behind her back, had just clicked into place. And she was still standing in the center of her own victory speech, too busy preening to notice the floor was gone beneath her. I followed the man toward the side exit. Behind me, I heard her boss mutter, "Who the hell was that?" I didn't need to turn around to answer, because the real question they should have asked wasn't, "Who is he?" It was, "Who the hell did I just hand the microphone to?" And the answer was simple. The man who built the very stage she thought she was standing on. He moved like he'd done it before. Like this wasn't the first time he'd walked into a room full of powerful people and ended someone's illusion of control. The jazz band trailed off mid-measure, a confused, disjointed end to a Gershwin classic. Conversations dropped to whispers. I watched the discomfort spread like a ripple in still water. One table turned their heads, then another. Even the servers paused, uncertain if they'd missed some protocol. No one recognized the man in the charcoal suit. That was the point. He didn't wear a badge. No drink in hand. No smile to signal he was just another donor or a +1 tagging along for shrimp cocktail and LinkedIn connections. He was tall, clean-shaven, early 50s, maybe. Moved like a man used to being escorted through back entrances, not red carpets. Security didn't stop him. In fact, the 2 guards near the pillars watched him approach and subtly stepped back, as if they knew better. He walked straight through the sea of applause and fake laughter toward our table like he'd paid for it. Her boss spotted him first. Froze, like a dog sensing something just before a thunderstorm. The man didn't make eye contact with anyone else. He just reached our table, leaned slightly, right next to the man my wife had been parading around like some strategic genius, and said, very calmly, "You're done. No theatrics. No announcement. No raised voice. Just a death sentence, sealed in 4 syllables. The guy's face dropped. His mouth opened like he wanted to protest, but nothing came out except a dry cough. My wife blinked. Wait, what did he just say? Then the man turned to me. They're ready for you. That's when it broke. Gasps. Several heads turned. One of the board members across the room straightened his tie and stood instinctively, like a kid caught sleeping in class. She grabbed my arm. What's going on? Her tone shifted from smug to strained. Why are they ready for you? I pulled my arm back. Quietly. No drama. I stood, straightened my jacket, and then she saw it. The slight change in posture. The way the room started turning toward me. Not him. Not her. Me. She laughed, a nervous twitch. Wait a second. What is this? But no one answered her. Because no one had to. People she thought were on her side were suddenly silent. Even her boss, Mr. Partner in every sense that matters, was reaching for his phone, furiously scrolling. Probably looking for a lifeline, an excuse, anything to explain what the hell just shifted. But the man who'd said, "You're done?" He was already walking away. And I followed him. No fanfare. No explanation. Just two men moving toward a door only one of us knew existed. As we passed the double doors, I caught a reflection in the mirror across the room. She was still seated, mouth slightly open, half a glass of rose raised in her hand, frozen mid-toast. And her boss? He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the exit, like a man who finally realized the lights in the hallway weren't flickering. They were being cut, one by one. The door clicked shut behind me, sealing out the laughter, the whine, the backslaps, the fake smiles. Everything they thought defined the night. Up here, there was no music, no spotlights, just quiet, controlled. The conference suite looked sterile, steel and glass, long walnut table, LED light panels humming faintly above. On the wall, a soundproofing panel flickered with a blue recording indicator. It had been live long before I arrived. For people sat at the table. Two men in tailored suits, one woman in a navy pantsuit tapping a pen against a leather portfolio, and another guy wearing a watch that cost more than her entire annual salary. Behind them, a fifth person stood as I entered. The only one who addressed me. "Mr. Wells," he said, stepping forward and extending a hand. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." He didn't have to thank me. He'd been on standby for 3 weeks. The others rose, subtle, but deliberate. Not out of respect. Out of position. They didn't know me socially. They knew me contractually. The woman at the far end, dark eyes, DOJ credentials clipped to her blouse, gave me a single nod. "We've prepared the file," the legal advisor said. He slid a binder across the table, navy blue with a silver clasp. "You'll find everything flagged by date, contract, and signature. Our internal review confirms exposure began in Q3 but escalated after the client trip to Vancouver." I opened it. The cover sheet. Subject, Conflicts of Interest, Crosswinds Group, LLC. Second line. Involvements. Stephanie Wells, Michael Reardon, CEO, third-party vendors, 14 identified instances. Her name was in bold. Over and over. "Where's the Vancouver charge?" I asked, flipping through. Tab 6. I turned it, revealing an expense report with initials in the margin. One of the flagged entries, Business Strategy Retreat, Penthouse Suite. Billed under a vendor account they didn't know I still controlled. "I want the DOJ to focus on that line item," I said without emotion. "That's the trigger." The woman in the pantsuit glanced up. "You're certain this is the clause breach?" I nodded. Page 114 of her employment agreement. Clause 11C, use of affiliated funds for personal benefit under non-disclosure terms. Signed by both parties. Witnessed. They had no idea the contracts she dismissed as just formalities were designed like tripwires. Silent until stepped on. The man with the expensive watch leaned forward. "And the relationship between her consulting firm and Reardon Global. It's established." "Yes. Her company was incorporated under my holding group last year. She insisted I just handle the paperwork so she could focus on branding." The irony didn't escape me. The moment she decided her ego mattered more than integrity, she gave me every tool I needed to burn down her empire without raising my voice. The legal advisor cleared his throat. "Then I believe we're ready to proceed with the forced divestiture. The contracts are ready. They just need your signature to initiate." I didn't rush. I turned to the back of the binder where the divestiture plan was neatly laid out, indexed, signed off by internal counsel, and pre-authorized pending my directive. They had been waiting. I had kept them waiting. Because timing was everything. Downstairs, she was still sipping rose, unaware that while she mocked the man next to her, the man she dismissed, the man she publicly ridiculed, was upstairs quietly changing the legal ownership structure of her entire company. Not through spite. Not out of revenge. Just policy. Just cleanup. I picked up the pen. "Let's begin." And in that moment, The man who'd been a background prop at her events, her silent chauffeur, her doting plus one, her invisible husband, became something else entirely. Not just a name on her incorporation paperwork, but the man whose signature would now define the next 20 years of her life. If she was lucky, it wasn't the affair that triggered it. It was the fourth strategy retreat, charged to a dormant vendor account she didn't even know still existed, because I created it 6 years ago when we first started planning our separate expansions. She never asked questions about the back end. She was too busy with color palettes, speaking gigs, and finding Instagrammable corners of our life to broadcast her brilliance. So when I offered to structure her new division as a protective arm under my firm's umbrella, she smiled, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "You're the genius with the boring stuff, honey." Then she signed every document I slid across the kitchen island without reading a word. That signature bound her to more than she'll ever understand. Non-disclosure clauses, dual audit triggers, conflict of interest restrictions, and a kill switch embedded so deep in the filings. Only 3 people on the planet even knew it existed. Myself, my general counsel, and a man named Edgar Hoyt, who'd built those mechanisms with me during a very cold winter 5 years ago, when we were both cleaning up the wreckage of a tech acquisition gone sideways. The clause wasn't easy to activate. It required a verified pattern of misuse, third-party beneficiary impact, and recorded violations of fiduciary obligation, which meant I had to be patient, painfully patient. For 6 months, I documented everything. The receipts for client dinners with Reardon, time-stamped and geolocated to the exact hotel bar where I'd installed my own cameras back when I suspected him of poaching mid-level managers from another firm. The itinerary for their innovation weekend that matched, to the hour, the flag charge from my forensic accountant. The audio file, obtained legally from my own property, where she joked with her assistant, "If we keep billing it through Calyx, no one's ever going to see it." Calyx Industries, my shell vendor. They build it. I saw it. The moment she said that, I time-stamped the clip, filed it under trigger index number 19, and waited. Because I knew she wasn't done. She still had one more step to take. And tonight, she did. On stage. Under lights. With that smug, triumphant sneer on her face. "Do you even know who he is?" "Yes, sweetheart. I know exactly who he is. And now, so does the Department of Justice." The binder upstairs had over 100 pages. But the page that mattered most was 73. The clause that stated any violation, once verified, granted me unilateral authority to initiate a full divestiture of any assets, licenses, or corporate structures tied to my name. Her company's entire legal framework was built on that foundation. Because I was the foundation, every license, every vendor, every payroll structure, all roads led back to me, which meant once she danced past the legal line and laughed while doing it, all I had to do was nod. The DOJ agent upstairs hadn't even blinked. "With these recordings," she'd said, "we don't even need to subpoena." She handed us the rope. I didn't flinch, didn't smile, just asked, "Is that sufficient for your office to proceed with notice?" She replied, "It's not just sufficient. It's surgical." I nodded, because that's what this had been from the start. Not rage, not revenge. Surgery. Clean, silent, lethal. And the woman who once bragged she'd built herself from nothing was about to learn what it means to be truly stripped of everything. Not by force, by contract. She came to me in a panic. That part, she probably doesn't remember. It was 2 weeks after her third failed pitch to investors, and the funding for her revolutionary consulting firm had evaporated faster than her last speaking fee. I found her in the kitchen, pacing barefoot in leggings, phone in one hand, makeup smudged from a networking brunch that had gone nowhere. "They don't get it," she kept saying. "These men just want control. They want proof I can manage scale. I need credibility, not another motivational quote about synergy." I listened, quietly. Then I said, "You want credibility? Fine. We do it under my umbrella." She narrowed her eyes. "What do you mean?" "Simple. I'll incorporate a shell under my parent company. You'll run the firm, but the paperwork gives us protection, legal insulation, tiered liability, all clean." She paused. "So you'd own it?" I tilted my head. "On paper? Yes. But I'll set the governance doc to give you operational control. It'll look like yours. Investors will see the structure. Trust it. It's how things actually get done." She bit her lip, looked out the window, then shrugged. "Fine. I don't have time to dive into all that. I've got to prep for this TEDx slot, and Jessica needs edits on the deck. Just email me whatever you need signed." And she did. Everything. Operating agreement. Parent Subsidiary Charter, Internal Code of Ethics, NDA, Fiduciary Compliance Clause. I built the architecture she would later parade as her vision, brick by legal brick. Every clause she never read became a loaded chamber. And tonight, the hammer came down. Because one of those contracts, buried deep in the onboarding packet she barely glanced at, explicitly barred her from forming secondary vendor agreements with any company sharing more than 5% interest overlap with her parent firm. Guess what percentage Reardon Global held in Calyx Capital through a silent partner? 6.3%. And guess who wrote the language defining beneficial interest disclosure? Me. Not only did she violate that clause, she did it in writing. Multiple times. In calendar invites. On branded invoices. In Slack channels she never thought I had admin access to. One message, from her to her assistant, read, "Loop Mike in on the Vancouver charges, but make it look like a separate vendor. Calyx and Reardon have handshake overlap. Can't make it obvious." That line alone put her in breach of 3 separate covenants. That line was now Exhibit B in a federal inquiry. The irony? She loved quoting contracts in public. At panels. On social media. "If you don't own your paperwork, you don't own your destiny," she once said into a microphone while flashing a confident smile and wearing a $2,000 blazer I'd written off under her firm's launch expenses. The paperwork she never read was now sitting in front of the DOJ, signed, dated, notarized, and digitally backed up in 3 redundant locations. One of which was on a drive labeled Garden Project, because I knew she'd never click on anything that sounded domestic. I had spent years watching her confuse charisma for competence. And now, every document she thought was beneath her was being weaponized by the very institution she once mocked as where ambition goes to die. She believed branding could outpace accountability. But legal documents don't care about hashtags or standing ovations. They care about ink. And her name was everywhere. Tied to me. Tied to him. Tied to the collapse she never saw coming. Back downstairs, the champagne had gone flat and the smiles were tightening at the edges. The kind of tension that creeps in when people feel they're standing on a rug that's slowly being pulled, yet no one wants to be the first to react. Reardon, her boss, her partner in every sense that matters, stood at the edge of the banquet floor, one hand on his hip, the other holding his phone like it had turned radioactive. His face had gone ghost white, a stark contrast to the crimson hue of the stage lights still glowing in the background from her big moment. He kept blinking, rereading, scrolling back up, down, back up. The subject line of the email was simple. Palm Springs Q2 alignment weekend. He had sent it nearly 8 months ago. In it, he outlined what he called a confidential itinerary for a supposed executive planning session. Full spa access, penthouse suite accommodations, no attendees except the 2 of them. He'd even itemized the expenses to be reimbursed through her firm's strategy development budget line. It was bold, idiotic, and it was never supposed to see daylight. Only 2 people had access to that correspondence, Reardon himself and her executive assistant, Celine. Celine had been with her from the beginning, recruited from a competitor, fiercely loyal, the kind of woman who brought her almond milk before meetings and filtered Slack messages before they reached her desk. She once called Celine her other brain, which made it all the more disturbing when Reardon looked toward the back hallway and saw that Celine's chair was empty. Her desk, cleared. Her security badge, missing. She hadn't been seen since lunch. He tried calling her. Voicemail. He tried her email. Bounce back. This address is no longer active. Meanwhile, the rest of the room hadn't noticed yet. They were still sipping cheap wine, gushing about her speech, asking where she bought her heels. But her smile was cracking. Something about Reardon's expression, confusion morphing into dread, made her lean toward him. "What is it?" she asked under her breath. He turned the phone toward her. "Did you forward this to anyone?" She stared at it, blinked. "No, that's..." Celine saw it. "That's it." He didn't say a word, because they both knew what that meant. Celine flipped. Someone got to her. Or maybe she was never on their side to begin with. That email, one of many, was now evidence. Verifiable, tied to receipts, timestamps, and transactions buried inside the firm's books under client entertainment. And worse, it was no longer in their hands. It had already been submitted. To the DOJ, to internal audit, possibly even to the board. Reardon clenched his jaw. Why would she do this? Stephanie looked pale now too. She was loyal. She knew everything. "I trusted." "Exactly," he said, cutting her off. She knew everything. And that was the problem. All her whispered plans. All the little workarounds. All the times she'd said, just delete the thread after. Celine hadn't deleted a damn thing. She'd copied it, archived it, categorized it, and tonight, she'd handed it off. Because somewhere, months earlier, someone had approached her with a different offer. Not more money, not power, just protection and a path off the ship before it sank. While they danced under the chandeliers, thinking they were invincible, the woman in the background was packing her files and flipping the chessboard. And now? Now they were alone, surrounded by people they thought were allies, suddenly too quiet, too still, because betrayal from an enemy stings. But betrayal from someone you trusted? That's when the cracks stop being metaphorical. That's when everything begins to fall. At 7:42 a.m., her phone buzzed with a conference-wide push notification. Today's keynote update, welcoming Wesley Wells, strategic compliance consultant, whistleblower, oversight advisor. She blinked, thinking it was a glitch. Wesley Wells. Her husband, the man who once spent half a cocktail hour trying to explain fiduciary audit frameworks to someone who'd asked about the shrimp skewers? She refreshed the screen. There it was again. His name, not just in the attendee list, headlining the 10 a.m. panel in the main ballroom. Must be a mistake, she muttered, swiping to the conference app's full schedule. But it wasn't. There was his headshot, crisp and professional, wearing a tailored charcoal suit she didn't recognize because it was new. Bought for this. Topic: the hidden cost of executive blind spots. A case study in internal exposure. The subtext practically punched her in the jaw. She grabbed her purse, shoved her phone into it, and raced down the lobby escalator. Her heels clicked sharp against the marble as she stormed past the coffee kiosk and the wall of digital signage looping her own awards speech from the night before. The same speech where she'd publicly reduced her husband to a joke. Now he was about to step on stage in front of board chairs, compliance officers, and C-level attendees from 3 continents, and she didn't even have access. She reached the ballroom entrance, flashed her badge at the scanner. Read. Denied. The security guard frowned. I'm sorry, ma'am. Looks like your credentials have been deactivated for this portion. What? No, I'm a speaker. Check again. He scanned it again. Same result. You've been removed from the active list as of 6 a.m. Any inquiries have to go through admin. She was stunned. There must be a mistake. My husband, Mr. Wells, is already inside, he said calmly, nodding toward the glass wall at the far end of the corridor. She followed his gaze. There he was, on stage. Not fumbling, not awkward, composed, controlled. The lights weren't too bright for him. He stood at the podium like he belonged there. Because he did. The screen behind him flashed a single slide. Crosswinds Group, a case study in quiet collapse. And beneath it, in smaller text, presented with support from the DOJ, Federal Whistleblower Integrity Unit. Her stomach flipped. No joke now. No witty comments about, do you even know who he is? Because everyone in that room did know now. And worse, they were listening to him. Inside, dozens of decision-makers nodded, took notes, whispered among themselves. She watched, powerless, from the other side of the glass, like a child peering into a world she no longer had the credentials to enter. She raised her phone to take a photo of the screen, maybe to send to Reardon, maybe to her lawyer. She wasn't sure anymore. But the moment she opened the camera app, she caught her own reflection in the glass. Mascara slightly smudged. Smile gone. Jaw clenched. Not a visionary. Not a rising star. Just a woman standing outside a locked room, watching the man she thought would always stay small rewrite her entire legacy, slide by damn slide. And she couldn't even get past the door. Her hands trembled as she hit redial for the 4th time. Ring. Click. Voicemail. This number is no longer active. All inquiries through legal counsel. She stared at the screen, confused. She'd called this number 100 times. Birthday calls, grocery lists, passive-aggressive reminders to pick up dry cleaning. Now it was a deadline. She opened her email app, typed out a message so fast it was riddled with typos, then edited it obsessively for 15 minutes. Subject, I messed up. Please, can we talk? Body, Wesley, I don't know what's happening. I didn't mean for any of this. It was never about choosing him over you. It was complicated, and I made mistakes. But we can fix this. We can explain everything. Please, just talk to me. I'm sorry. She hit send. 3 seconds later. Delivery failed. The recipient's mailbox is unavailable. She stared at it like it had betrayed her. She copied the email and sent it to his personal backup, the one he never used. Delivery failed. Then she tried his lawyer. No reply. She called his sister, voicemail. His brother, nothing. Her fingers moved like they were possessed. Message after message. Please tell him I'm trying to reach him. Can you ask him to check his email? Does he still have the condo on Sycamore? No one responded. Silence. It was like he'd vanished. No, not vanished. Removed. By his own hand. She paced her apartment, stepping over half-packed suitcases and 3 laptops humming on the kitchen counter. The news was getting worse. Compliance reviews, audit flags, partners distancing themselves from her firm. And through it all, Wesley was unreachable. Not angry. Not confrontational. Just gone. She grabbed her keys. If he wouldn't answer, she'd go in person. The drive to his apartment took 18 minutes. She didn't even remember the route. Her mind was stuck in loops. What would she say? What would she wear? Should she cry? Not cry? Bring the letter she printed? When she pulled up to the luxury high-rise, the valet recognized her immediately. Mrs. Wells, he said with a smile that vanished once he looked at his screen. I'm sorry. I was told to let you know Mr. Wells is no longer residing here. She blinked. What? Since when? He hesitated. As of last week. The unit's been reassigned. His belongings were removed by professional service under instruction from his attorney. She stood there, keys still in hand. Did he leave a forwarding address? He shook his head. No, ma'am. Just a line. Please inform anyone asking that this residence is no longer associated with me. She felt the floor tilt. Even when she left her first husband, even when her own father stopped taking her calls after her 3rd career pivot, someone had always picked up. Someone had always offered a thread to pull on. But now, nothing. Just empty rooms and legal disclaimers. He hadn't just cut her off. He'd rewritten the landscape she used to stand on, and quietly moved the ground beneath her feet without her ever noticing. Now the man she once mocked for being too quiet had gone silent in a way she couldn't reach. And silence, she realized, was the most devastating sound of all. It arrived with a knock. A courier in a plain gray uniform, clipboard in hand, eyes glazed with the exhaustion of 1,000 morning deliveries. Stephanie Reardon Wells. She hesitated before saying yes. Technically yes, although she'd stopped using Wells on LinkedIn months ago. The man handed her a flat, sealed envelope. Certified. Signature required. No return address, just a legal services watermark and a barcode. She stared at it like it was a live wire. Inside, a single letter. No cover note. No explanation. Just a formal notification on crisp ivory paper, addressed to the board of Crosswinds Group, CC to its legal department, compliance team, and every managing partner. Subject: voluntary withdrawal of spousal endorsement for director-level security clearance, Stephanie Reardon Wells. Her name, in bold. The text was brief. Per the conditions of the original compliance memorandum, ref #8812B, I hereby withdraw my spousal endorsement for Stephanie Reardon Wells as it pertains to her eligibility for access to protected contracts, sensitive client data, or any division regulated under federal oversight. This revocation is effective immediately and does not require mutual consent. Signed, Wesley A. Wells, Strategic Compliance Advisor, Consulting Partner, Integrity Oversight Collective. No emotion, no farewell, just precision. She dropped the envelope on the kitchen table, heart pounding. Her phone buzzed before she could even process what it meant. A message from legal. Effective immediately, your access to Tier 1 accounts has been suspended pending resolution of the endorsement withdrawal. Please do not attend tomorrow's pitch meeting. Another message, this time from the head of business development. Steph, what's going on? Why is your husband pulling security endorsements? The board is not happy. Then silence. For an hour. 2. By 3 p.m., she tried dialing into the team huddle anyway. Password denied. Access revoked. She stared at the screen, then at her own reflection in the black glass of her powered-down monitor. Mascara on one eye. Hair still tied from the rushed shower. She looked like a parody of every woman she'd ever mocked. Lost, confused, locked out. She opened her laptop and searched his name. The first result was a video, posted just 2 hours ago. A clip from his keynote. Uploaded by the conference team. Title: The Power of Knowing When to Stay Quiet and When to Strike. 1.2 million views already. She clicked it, and there he was, Wesley, her quiet, forgettable husband, standing before a room of executives and regulators, delivering a brutal, polished talk about structural integrity, legal exposure, and the danger of mistaking silence for weakness. In the comments, someone had written, "This man just dismantled an empire without raising his voice." Legend. Her fingers hovered over the trackpad. She didn't know whether to hit replay or throw the laptop out the window. She rose from her chair and went to the mirror. Not to admire, not to prep, just to look. to see. What stared back wasn't powerful, wasn't visionary. It was a woman in yesterday's shirt with no clients, no clearance, and no idea how the man she once dismissed had become the arbiter of her professional existence. She screamed. At her reflection. At the mirror. A guttural, ragged scream. 1 part grief, 2 parts rage, all of it useless. Because no one was listening. Not the board. Not her team. And certainly not Wesley. They were all watching his speech. Not hers. His. The applause was sustained. Not thunderous, but respectful. The kind of sound that came from people who now understood they'd misjudged someone. Wesley didn't smile as he walked off stage. He didn't pump a fist, didn't nod theatrically like those startup founders who thought sweat and slide decks made them philosophers. He just stepped down from the dais, unhooked the mic from his lapel, and handed it to the tech without a word. Behind him, the giant screen still displayed his final slide. Compliance is not punishment. It's protection from the rot you don't see until it swallows you. Somewhere in the back, a reporter raised a hand and jogged forward, trying to beat the others. Mr. Wells, a quick question, just one. He turned, polite. Is it true you were married to Stephanie Reardon? A pause, just long enough to let the silence hang. Then, that was another life. He didn't flinch, didn't need to. He moved past the crowd and through the side corridor of the convention center, where security and senior staff nodded him through without asking. In the far corner of the room, the part shielded from cameras and ambient chatter, stood the man in the charcoal suit. The same one who'd walked through the gala like he owned the floor. The one who leaned down and calmly told Reardon, "You're done." He wasn't there for show, wasn't a handler. His badge, if anyone had cared to look closely that night, didn't belong to the venue. It belonged to the office of the Inspector General. He stepped forward now, handed Wesley a sealed folder marked with a federal seal. No words, no handshake. Just a nod of mutual understanding between two professionals who had done what needed to be done. Because this hadn't been revenge. It had been a purge. The culmination of over a year of strategic silence. Of watching, recording, documenting, building a case as methodically as a surgeon preps a table. And Wesley hadn't done it for ego. He hadn't needed to humiliate her. She'd done that to herself. He'd simply ensured the world saw it for what it was. A structure built on lies and vanity. Crumbling the moment it faced real scrutiny. She'd always mistaken his quiet for weakness. Thought his patience meant irrelevance. But the truth was simple. He'd never been powerless. He was the broom. The one sent in after the storm, not to salvage, but to sweep. As the room behind them buzzed with networking and name-tagged introductions, Wesley stepped through the exit doors into the cool air outside. No celebration. No entourage. Just silence. The kind of silence earned by a man who no longer had anything to prove, because he'd already rewritten the ending. And she would spend the rest of her career, if she still had one, watching everyone else turn to him for answers. Not her. Him.